I've heard your thoughts on the process of voting, about how you don't necessarily think it is what they tell us it is.
Right.
And I would just want to know, could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
I think it's dangerous to tell people vote, 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 and not place the emphasis on what we're voting for and what the power of voting actually does and what your vote actually represents. I think people are not educated about the Electoral College and how it works. And I also think that people take for granted the fact that, we should have more than a two-party system. I think that the problems that we have with the Electoral College, plus the fact that, especially particularly on presidential level politics, but really through the whole thing, you have the two-party system. I think those things are fraudulent, and I'm not comfortable telling people to participate in fraud. At the same time, I think that voting can be and has been in the past a powerful tool for community development and moving things along. I think there's communities, communities of people of different ethnicities who have used voting to their benefit. I think for the descendants of slaves, it's been a little bit harder. But I think if we take the example of, like, say, an Adam Clay Powell, or what they were doing in the 60s, and voting as blocks, voting as communities, I think we can have real change. But I think that depends on having revolutionary candidates. If somebody's talking about raising revolutionary candidates, I'm all for that. I support the Ras Barakas of the world. You know what I'm saying? But just to be voting, I think that's fraudulent and a mistake.
So what would you recommend as a complement to voting?
I don't think I would be allowed to say what I say about voting if I didn't participate in my community in other ways. If I just said this on Twitter and just rapped about nothing, or I didn't actively participate in activist struggle around the world, then I should just probably shut the hell up. But I think I've earned the right to say it because, like I said, it's a tool. Activism is a tool too. As long as you're using one of the tools, there's nothing I can really say to you. So there are activists that I roll with who actively participating in voter registration and down with that, and I'm down for them. That's just not my fight. You know what I'm saying?
I actually heard you mention this word tonight, this phrase tonight too, and it actually made me think about your interview with Don Lemon back in August. You mentioned the term. You said something about white supremacy, running the world. And I want to know how you define white supremacy and how is it running the world?
White supremacy is an idea that was developed to justify the slave trade. Racism is a fairly new concept in the history of the world. It's based on greed. Racism is developed to keep people of color oppressed, and white supremacy is the idea that the white man or the descendants of Europe, their culture, their lives, everything about them is more valuable than people of color. And it's a system that's been incredibly successful and incredibly effective. And it sets the tone and sets the game for how things are now. In America more than any other place. I can only speak from my perspective as an American. Because America is literally built on slavery, literally built on the concept that black people are inferior. Our country's built on it. That concept is at the heart of all our institutions, is at the heart of our economics, of how we run our hospitals, of our academics, everything. So racism is something that permeates America, whether you're intentionally trying to participate in it or not. So if I'm like fuck all niggas, and I'm like, I think that dark-skinned people are more violent than light-skinned people, which are real things that people say in our community. That I'm black, but I'm still perpetuating white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? If I say, I don't see race, I don't see color, I'm perpetuating white supremacy. Because if you don't see color, then you don't see who a person is. You're not seeing all that, the culture, or everything about them. You're trying to ignore a piece of them. Right. That's what white supremacy is, saying that your culture, who you are, is not valuable here. And our world is run by that on the level of like the big banks, and the world and like the IMF and all that. That's white supremacy. Ain't no brothers up there. You know what I'm saying? And on the level of, Officer Darren Wilson, who thought it's okay to shoot Mike Brown 6 times. It's white supremacy. And the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, prison industrial complex is putting poor people and people of color in jail so that we can make profit. The military industrial complex is bombing brown people for profit. It's white supremacy, all of it.
I'm going to have to quote a lyric from Miss Hill.
Okay.
I think in one section of the song, you say, we used to read Francis Cress and anything by Third World Press.
Yeah.
Yes. I mention it because I'm a big fan, and I'm actually a big fan of Third World Press books. The founder of Third World Press is actually a native of Little Rock.
He's asking what?
A native of Little Rock.
Who, Haki?
Yes. He's a native of Little Rock. What, I guess, mentioning the Third World Press, what books were essential for you to gain an understanding of white supremacy? What books, what authors were instrumental in you gaining an understanding?
Dr. Welsing was instrumental, even though there's a lot in her book that as I become an adult, I didn't agree with at all. But growing up as a kid, it was very influential on me. Miramba Ani did a book called Yurugu. That really broke it down for me in a lot of ways. Dr. Ben, John Henry Clark, people like that when I was coming of age were who I was reading. I was reading about Ivan Van Sertima, Shanghaiti Diop. These reading about African impact on civilization and religion and culture and everything, and also reading I've really Yurugu. That really broke it down in a big way.
That's a heavy
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess also the same token of also talking about books. How do you feel like being a extremely, I guess, well-read, literate person? How do you think that contribute to your lyricism?
I think all rappers are nerds. Jay-Z's a hustle nerd, Nas project nerd, Bun B's a trill nerd. You know what I'm saying? But you have to be fluent with the language and know words. I think we all, I working in the bookstore, you realize that every literate person loves to read. We all love to read. We just never get put on to things that relate to us. As soon as you see something that relates to you, you gobble it up. So if you're like a Beyonce fan and you see an article on the newsstand, you're buying that and you're going to read it and immediately because you love to read. It's just got to be something that interests you. So I think all of us have that.
Okay. Who is Talib Kweli listening to nowadays?
I'm listening to artists that I'm working with. Nico Is, Kay Valentine, Jessica Care Moore, Reese. I'm trying to put together this movement with Chavoti Media.
What do you think of? I recently heard an interview about you talking about Macklemore, and you saying that it's not so much that people, I guess, hip hop heads have a problem with him, but it's more so his audience. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, Macklemore. The lesson that I got from Macklemore and Ryan Lewis is a lesson that any indie artist should appreciate, and it's like they really did it on their own terms, more than anybody. Did they blow up? Did them being white have something to do with them blowing up? Certainly. That's why Macklemore made a song 10 years ago called White Privilege, because he knew. But their audience, and I saw the shows before they went pop, was decidedly hip-hop. It was a white audience, but there were white kids who were into hip-hop. Just like there'd be a lot of white kids at my shows. There were white kids who were into hip-hop. Once Thrift Shop blew up and Can't Hold Us blew up, the audience changed. It became little girls who were into pop, and it became a pop audience, which is a very different hip-hop audience. When Macklemore had a hip-hop audience, hip-hop didn't know who he was. They didn't care about him. They didn't care about him or form an opinion on him until he developed a pop audience. So their opinion on him is not based on who he was as an MC, or not based on he don't have the right to be rapping, or he's not real, or it's not based on, because they don't know that Macklemore. It's only based on who the hell is this white boy that came out of nowhere. And look at how whack his fans are. He's not doing hip-hop because he's not performing for hip-hop people. Me going on that tour with him, it was me, Big Crit, and Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. Me and Crit style is different. But what we did was very different. Like, the audience was just looking at us like, when's somebody going to do Thrift Shop? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a hip-hop audience, but it doesn't make him any less hip-hop.
One last question. This year, 2014, is the 20th anniversary of Illinois. It's the also, I believe, it's the 20th anniversary of Bone Thugs and Harmony's first album. Where do you see yourself? Better yet, how do you think hip hop fans will remember you years from now?
I did it my way and with my own name. You know.